My name is Isabella Cruz. 10 years ago, I was just an anonymous financial analyst, pregnant with twins and discarded by a powerful lover with a $10,000 check. I lost my job, lost my home, was disowned by my mother, and I truly believed my life had ended in a rundown shelter in Queens. But today, I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company, the mother of two brilliant daughters, and the majority shareholder of the very firm that once tried to bury me. Before I share my full story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever overcome hardship for your family, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. The fluorescent lights in Everidge Capital's conference room flickered slightly, casting shadows across the spreadsheets I'd been staring at for the past 14 hours. My eyes burned, but I couldn't stop now. Not when I was this close to finishing the analysis that could change everything. Still here, Isabella? I looked up to find Ethan Caldwell standing in the doorway, his perfectly tailored suit somehow still crisp despite the late hour. My heart did that stupid little flutter it always did when he appeared. The CEO of one of Manhattan's most prestigious investment firms, checking on his newest analyst. Me, Isabella Cruz from Hialeah, whose parents still didn't understand why I'd left Florida for this cold, unforgiving city. Just finishing up the emerging markets report, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Mija, why do you work so hard for people who don't even know your name? But Ethan did know my name. He'd been the one to hire me, fresh out of my master's program at Boston University. Said he saw potential in me that others might miss. Leave it, he said, walking closer. It's past midnight. Even analysts need sleep. I smiled, feeling bold. You're still here too. Touché. He leaned against the desk, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive that probably cost more than my monthly Metro card. You remind me of myself when I was starting out, hungry, determined. If only he knew how literal that hunger had been, how I'd survived on ramen and dreams through grad school, how the scholarship to Columbia for my MBA sat unopened in my apartment because I couldn't afford to stop working, not with my father's medical bills piling up back home. Over the next few weeks, our late-night encounters became routine. He'd find excuses to stop by my desk, to include me in high-level meetings where I definitely didn't belong. When he suggested we discuss the quarterly projections over dinner, I knew we'd crossed a line, but I didn't care. For the first time since arriving in New York, someone saw me as more than just another replaceable analyst. Ethan asked about my ideas, my ambitions. He laughed at my jokes about the contrast between Miami heat and Manhattan winters. He even seemed impressed when I mentioned my acceptance to Columbia. You should go, he'd said over wine at Daniel. Education is power. Easy for him to say. His trust fund had probably paid for Yale without him thinking twice. But when he looked at me with those intense green eyes, I could almost believe that anything was possible. The night of the company gala changed everything. I'd spent a week's salary on a dress that would fit in among the designer gowns, practiced walking in heels that made my feet scream. When Ethan found me on the balcony, escaping the suffocating small talk about vacation homes and private schools, he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. You don't belong in there either, I said, nodding toward the ballroom. He laughed, a real laugh, not the polished one he used with clients. What makes you think that? Because you're out here with me instead. The kiss was inevitable. So was everything that followed. His penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The way he whispered my name like a prayer. The promises that felt real in the darkness. I should have known better. Should have remembered what my abuela always said. Some people collect beautiful things not to keep them, but to prove they can. The nausea hit me first. 2 weeks of morning sickness that I blamed on stress, on the long hours, on the food truck coffee I grabbed between meetings. But when I found myself crying over a spreadsheet, actually crying over numbers, I knew something was wrong. The pregnancy test felt like holding a bomb. 2 pink lines that could destroy everything I'd worked for. But underneath the terror, a tiny spark of something else flickered. Hope, maybe, or just the foolish belief that Ethan and I had something real. I waited 3 days before telling him. 3 days of imagining conversations, of practicing words that might make this okay. I chose his office after hours, when the building was quiet and we could talk without interruption. I need to tell you something, I started, my hands shaking as I closed the door behind me. He didn't look up from his monitors. Make it quick, Isabella. I have a call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. The words tumbled out gracelessly. I'm pregnant. It's twins. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally looked at me, his face had transformed into something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating. The face he wore when dismantling failing companies. I see. He leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a problematic investment. And you're telling me this because... My mouth went dry. Because they're yours. Because I thought... You thought what? His laugh was sharp, cruel. That this was some kind of fairy tale? That you'd baby trap your way from the analyst pool to the penthouse? Baby trap. The words hit me like a physical blow. I didn't plan this. Of course you didn't. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a checkbook. Lucky for you, I did. These things happen in our industry. Occupational hazards, you might say. He wrote the check with quick, efficient strokes. $10,000. This should cover your inconvenience. There's a clinic on the Upper East Side. Very discreet. I'll have my assistant send you the information. I stared at the check, my vision blurring. I'm keeping them. That's your choice. He slid a document across the desk. But you'll sign this. No contact, no claims, no mention of my name, ever. Ethan, please. It's Mr. Caldwell. The ice in his voice could have frozen the Hudson. And I believe we're done here. You should start looking for other employment opportunities. Everidge has decided to restructure the analyst department. I stood on shaking legs, leaving the check and the document on his desk. You're making a mistake. The only mistake, he said, already turning back to his screens, was thinking you were different from the others. I was escorted from the building that night by security, my personal items in a cardboard box like some cliché from a movie. By morning, my company email was deactivated, my keycard void. By the end of the week, every firm I'd sent my resume to had mysteriously just filled the position or decided to go in another direction. The Whisper network in Manhattan finance is efficient and cruel. Word spreads fast when someone like Ethan Caldwell marks you as untouchable. My phone stopped ringing. Recruiters who'd pursued me aggressively suddenly wouldn't return my calls. I called my mother in desperation, but the moment I mentioned the pregnancy, her voice turned to stone. No daughter of mine, she said in Spanish, the language she used when she was most disappointed, brings shame like this to our family. You made your choices, Isabella. Live with them. The click of her hanging up echoed in my empty apartment, the one I could no longer afford. The shelter in Queens smelled like industrial disinfectant and despair. I learned quickly to sleep with my purse under my pillow, to shower at 5 a.m. when the bathroom was empty, to ignore the crying that echoed through the halls at night. My MBA acceptance letter from Columbia became a bookmark in the pregnancy guide I'd bought with my last $20. Working at Amazon felt like karma's cruel joke. Here I was, the woman who'd analyzed multi-million-dollar portfolios, scanning packages in a warehouse that could have fit my old office building twice over. The weight of the twins made every shift agony, but I couldn't afford to stop. The coffee shop morning shift started 2 hours after the warehouse shift ended. I napped on the subway between jobs, one hand protective over my growing belly. You need to eat more, Kesha, another shelter resident, told me one night, sliding half her sandwich across the communal table. Those babies need more than coffee and determination. But food cost money, and money meant working, and working meant staying on my feet until my ankles swelled and my back screamed. I was caught in a cycle I'd studied in economics classes but never imagined living. The day I collapsed changed everything. I remember the tile floor of the coffee shop rushing up to meet me, the sharp smell of espresso mixing with copper taste of blood in my mouth. Then darkness, blessed and complete. I woke to a woman's face hovering over mine, her dark skin gleaming under harsh hospital lights. There you are, she said, her voice warm like honey. You gave us quite a scare. Dr. Maya Turner had the kind of presence that made you want to confess everything. Maybe it was exhaustion or hormones or just the relief of someone looking at me with kindness instead of pity or disgust. The whole story poured out. Ethan, the blacklisting, the shelter, the impossible juggle of survival. "You're lucky," she said when I finished. "Another week of this and you might have lost them." She paused, studying my chart. "You have options, you know. There are programs. I'm keeping them," I said, the same words I'd told Ethan, but this time with less certainty. How could I raise children when I couldn't even feed myself? Maya nodded slowly. "Then let me help. My sister runs a program for women in your situation. It's not charity," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "It's investment. In you, in your children, in breaking these cycles." She scribbled an address on a prescription pad. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Ask for Jasmine Turner. Tell her I sent you." The office was in Brooklyn, sandwiched between a bodega and a nail salon. Nothing like the gleaming towers of Manhattan finance. But Jasmine Turner commanded the room like any CEO I'd met. Her natural hair crowned like royalty. Her smile genuine but assessing. "Maya says you need help," she said simply. "Tell me what you're good at." I almost laughed. What was I good at? Analyzing markets that had rejected me? Building models for money I'd never see? But she waited patiently, and something about her stillness made me honest. "Numbers," I said finally. "I see patterns others miss. I can make data tell stories." She pushed a laptop across the desk. "Prove it." For the next hour, I lost myself in spreadsheets filled with donation records, expense reports, grant applications. The errors jumped out at me like neon signs. By the time I looked up, Jasmine was smiling. "You've just identified 3 accounting errors that have been costing us thousands," she said. "When can you start?" The contractions started during a budget meeting. I'd been hiding them for hours, breathing through the pain while explaining why we needed to restructure our vendor contracts. Jasmine took one look at my white knuckles gripping the conference table and called an ambulance. 23 hours later, Hope arrived first, screaming her fury at the world. Luna followed quietly, like she was sneaking into a party she wasn't sure she was invited to. When the nurse placed them in my arms, everything I'd lost suddenly seemed like a small price for what I'd gained. "They're beautiful," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. She'd stayed through the entire labor, holding my hand when I screamed, reminding me to breathe when I forgot how. Jasmine arrived with bags of supplies I hadn't even known I needed. "My assistant picked these up," she said casually, as if CEOs regularly went shopping for their temporary employees' babies. "We'll figure out the rest as we go." The temporary job became permanent within a month. Jasmine didn't just need someone to fix her books. She needed someone who understood the intersection of finance and social impact. Her company, Turner Sustainable Solutions, was trying to bring solar power to low-income neighborhoods, but the numbers weren't working. "Traditional models don't apply here," I explained during one late-night session, Luna sleeping in a carrier beside my desk while Hope cooed from Jasmine's arms. "We need to think differently about ROI, social return, not just financial." We developed a subscription model that made solar accessible to families living paycheck to paycheck. I remembered my own family's struggles with electricity bills in Florida summers, how my mother would turn off the AC to save money while we sweated through homework. That memory drove every calculation. The MBA program came through Jasmine's connections, a scholarship specifically for single mothers in STEM fields. I attended classes online after the twins were asleep, writing papers while pumping breast milk, building financial models with a baby monitor always in view. "You don't have to do everything at once," Maya reminded me during one of her visits, finding me asleep over my laptop with formula stains on my shirt. But I did. Every achievement felt like a brick in the wall between my daughters and the shelter I'd slept in while carrying them. Every grade, every successful project, every small victory was proof that Ethan had been wrong about me. By the time the twins turned 2, Turner Sustainable Solutions had become EcoNova Solutions, and I'd traded my analyst title for CFO. The transformation felt surreal, from scanning packages to signing million-dollar deals, from shelter beds to a modest apartment in Park Slope where Hope and Luna had their own room painted sunshine yellow. "We need to think bigger," Jasmine announced during our third anniversary celebration, her eyes bright with the fever of ambition I'd learned to recognize. Solar panels are just the beginning. Energy storage is the future. She was right, of course. Low-income families didn't just need clean energy. They needed reliable power that wouldn't fail during grid outages. We developed battery systems that could be paid off in installments, turning energy independence from a luxury into an achievable goal. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that probably wasn't entirely healthy. But every successful installation felt personal. Every family who could keep their lights on during a blackout, every elderly person who didn't have to choose between medication and electricity bills. They all carried the ghost of who I might have been. "Mama, why do you work so much?" Hope asked one evening, her face serious in that way only 4-year-olds can manage. I pulled both girls onto my lap, breathing in their bubble bath scent. "So you can dream as big as you want," I told them, "and no one can ever tell you it's impossible." The call that changed everything came on a Tuesday. I was reviewing our latest funding round when my assistant knocked. "There's a company trying to poach our battery technology patent," she said. "Should I loop in legal?" Something in her expression made me look closer at the documentation. The shell company had layers of ownership, but I'd learned to follow money trails like breadcrumbs. Each layer peeled back revealed another until finally, at the center, a familiar name: Everidge Capital. Ethan. My hands trembled as I pulled up more records. This wasn't just about our company. Everidge had been systematically acquiring clean energy startups, stripping their technology and shelving innovations that might disrupt traditional energy investments. "He's killing progress to protect profit," I told Jasmine, spreading the evidence across her desk. "Including that company we partnered with last year. They didn't go under. They were absorbed." Jasmine's expression darkened. "That bastard. Do you know what this means? Every community that could have had clean energy but didn't, every family still choking on generator fumes." She stopped, pressing her fingers to her temples. "We can't let him do this to us." But fighting Everidge meant fighting Ethan. And despite everything, some small part of me had hoped to never cross his path again. The girls didn't know their father's name, had never asked why other children had daddies and they didn't. How could I go to war with their ghost? "Izzy," Jasmine said gently, using the nickname she'd adopted when the girls started talking. "This isn't about him anymore. This is about everything we've built." She was right. The woman who'd stood in Ethan's office with shaking hands was gone. In her place stood someone who'd rebuilt herself from rubble, who'd turned rejection into fuel for transformation. If he wanted a fight, he'd get one. Creating Aurora Fund took 6 months of careful planning. Named after my mother, because even rejection couldn't erase the love I still carried for her, it started as a simple investment vehicle focused on sustainable technology. But I had bigger plans. "You want to do what?" My lawyer, Patricia Chen, stared at me across her desk like I'd suggested jumping off the Brooklyn Bridge. "Buy Everidge Capital," I repeated calmly. "Not all at once. Pieces, quietly, through different entities." She leaned back, studying me with the sharp intelligence that made her the best corporate attorney in New York. "You know this is David versus Goliath, right? Except David is a single mother with limited resources and Goliath owns half of Manhattan." "Goliath got arrogant," I said. "He's so focused on crushing competitors he's not watching his flanks." The strategy was simple in concept, brutal in execution. Everidge had grown by acquisition, swallowing smaller firms until it became too large to manage efficiently. That size was its weakness. I started with the edges, buying shares through pension funds that needed better returns, approaching disgruntled limited partners who'd watched their investments stagnate while Ethan played power games. Every purchase required sacrifices. I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the last connection to my family in Florida. Moved to an even smaller apartment. Worked 18-hour days while the twins stayed with Maya or at the daycare Jasmine had set up for Econova employees. "Mama's building something," I'd tell them during our bedtime stories, their faces illuminated by the nightlight shaped like a crescent moon. "Something that will last longer than any fairy tale castle." The call from Jasmine came on a Wednesday evening. I was reviewing acquisition paperwork when her name flashed on my screen. Her voice, usually so strong, sounded small. "I need to see you. Now." I found her in her office, Medical papers spread across her desk like tarot cards predicting a dark future. Ovarian cancer, stage 3. The words hit me like physical blows. The doctors say, with treatment, she started, then stopped. Izzy, I need to know the company will survive. Everything we've built, all these communities counting on us? Don't, I said fiercely, gripping her hands. Don't you dare talk like you're already gone. But she insisted on drawing up succession papers that night. CEO of EcoNova Solutions transferred to Isabella Cruz. Effective immediately. The weight of it felt heavier than both my daughters combined. I have something else to tell you, she said as we finished the paperwork. About Ethan Caldwell. My chest tightened. What about him? 10 years ago, I had a company. Small, innovative, ready to revolutionize water purification in developing nations. Her eyes hardened. Ethan's firm was supposed to provide Series A funding. They strung us along for months, learned all our technology, then pulled out at the last second. 3 months later, a competitor launched our exact innovation. The pieces clicked into place. He destroyed your first company. And nearly destroyed me. I spent 5 years rebuilding, swearing I'd never let anyone have that power again. She squeezed my hand. When Maya brought you to me, I recognized the look. The same devastation, the same determination. I didn't know it was the same man until recently. We sat in silence. 2 women bound by the same ghost, the same scars transformed into strength. Outside, Manhattan glittered like a circuit board. All those lights powered by choices and consequences. Finish it, Jasmine said quietly. For both of us. The Chicago Energy Summit was the Super Bowl of sustainable technology, and I'd dressed for battle. The emerald gown cost more than I'd spent on clothes in 5 years, but image mattered in this arena. Hope and Luna flanked me in matching silver dresses, their 10-year-old faces serious with the importance of the moment. Remember, I whispered as we entered the ballroom. Shoulders back, heads high. We belong here. The whispers started immediately. Isabella Cruz, the CEO who'd built Aurora Fund from nothing. The single mother who'd transformed EcoNova into a billion-dollar company. The woman who'd quietly accumulated 51% of Everridge capital. I saw the exact moment Ethan noticed us. He stood near the stage, surrounded by sycophants and photographers, the keynote speaker everyone had come to hear. His face went white, then red. His eyes locked on the twins. Hope had his eyes, green as spring grass. Luna had his sharp cheekbones, softened by my Caribbean heritage. There was no denying what they were, the children he'd tried to erase with a $10,000 check. Ms. Cruz, a reporter materialized beside us. Is it true Aurora Fund has taken controlling interest in Everridge Capital? I smiled, the kind of smile I'd learned in boardrooms where weakness meant death. I'm scheduled to make an announcement after Mr. Caldwell's keynote. I'm sure he'll be fascinated to hear about the new direction his company will be taking. The speech felt endless. Ethan stumbled over words, his usual polish cracking as he kept glancing at us. When he finally finished, to lukewarm applause, I rose. Mama, Luna whispered, is that man why you cry sometimes? I kissed her forehead. Not anymore, baby. Watch what happens when we refuse to stay broken. The walk to the stage stretched forever and lasted seconds. I felt Ethan's presence like electricity in the air, but I didn't look at him. This wasn't about him anymore. Good evening, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. 10 years ago, I was told I was an occupational hazard, a mistake to be erased with a check. Tonight, I stand here as the majority owner of Everridge Capital, proof that the only mistake was underestimating the power of a woman with nothing left to lose. The announcement landed like a bomb. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but I kept my eyes on my daughters, drawing strength from their proud faces. Effective immediately, Everridge Capital will cease all activities that suppress clean energy innovation. The patents we've hoarded will be released. The technologies we've buried will see daylight. Because power isn't about keeping others in the dark. It's about bringing light to places that need it most. When I finally looked at Ethan, he seemed smaller, somehow. Older, deflated. He approached as I left the stage, his face a mask of desperate calculation. Isabella, we should talk. About the girls, about... Their names are Hope and Luna, I said quietly, and you lost the right to know them the night you called them a mistake. 6 months later, I stood in the Oval Office, my daughters fidgeting beside me in their best dresses. The president was appointing me senior advisor on sustainable energy policy, a position created specifically to bridge the gap between innovation and implementation. Your story, the president said during our private meeting, represents everything we're fighting for. The American dream isn't just about individual success. It's about lifting others as we climb. Hope and Luna had been accepted to the National Academy for Advanced Sciences, their potential already showing in the way they approached problems. Hope wanted to engineer solutions to climate change. Luna dreamed of using AI to optimize energy distribution. They carried their father's intelligence and my determination, creating something entirely new. Jasmine was still fighting, each chemotherapy session a battle she faced with the same fierce grace she brought to business. I'm going to dance at their weddings, she'd say, even on the hardest days. Just watch me. The letter from Ethan arrived on a Tuesday, forwarded through lawyers. He'd been removed from Everidge's board, his reputation in tatters. He was living in Switzerland now, teaching at some private equity program. The letter was long, full of regrets and recognition, asking for a chance to know his daughters. I let the girls read it. They were old enough now to make their own choices. He says he's sorry, Hope said, her face thoughtful. But sorry doesn't change the past. No, I agreed. But sometimes it can change the future. Luna looked up from the letter. Do you forgive him, Mama? I thought about the woman I'd been, crying in that shelter, sure my life was over. About the nights I'd worked until my eyes burned, the sacrifices that had led to this moment. About Jasmine's strength and Maya's kindness, about communities powered by technology that might never have existed. I forgive the girl who thought she needed his validation, I said finally. And I'm grateful to him, in a way. His cruelty taught me my own strength. We decided together to send a single response. A photo of the girls at their science fair, standing beside their project on renewable energy in developing nations. No words were necessary. The image said everything. What he'd lost, what we'd built, what was possible when rejection became fuel for transformation. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony. Manhattan spread before me like a promise kept. Somewhere in those lights were the offices where I'd been deemed worthless, the shelter where I'd found bottom, the small Brooklyn office where I'd been reborn. Some words take 10 seconds to speak, I whispered to the city, to my sleeping daughters, to every woman who'd been told she was a mistake. But their echoes last forever. The only choice is whether they destroy us or forge us into something unbreakable. The night wind carried my words away, but their truth remained. I had been broken. I had been reforged. And in that transformation, I discovered that the price of a dismissive word could be the catalyst for an empire built on purpose, powered by pain transformed into possibility. We were proof that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the audacity to rise so high that those who dismissed you become footnotes in your success story. And somewhere in Switzerland, a man was learning what I'd always known. Some mistakes can't be undone. They can only be outlived by those strong enough to survive them. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or lost everything because you trusted the wrong person, remember this. Sometimes pain is the very fuel that ignites your rebirth. Don't let anyone define your worth with a rejection or a check. You are not a mistake. You are living proof that rising strong can create the impossible. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a spark of hope. And don't forget to leave a comment about your own journey. You are not alone.